background. We're very happy this evening to be joined by our Praxis Consulting Group, which I guess was initiated in 2005. And let me know if I generally describe your practice correctly, because it's extremely comprehensive, addressing finance and development involving directly with nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, and governmental agencies to advise on the creation of affordable housing. Your organization looks at every tier in the spectrum, and that really falls in line nicely with our goal this year with the programming we've created to kind of bring a more comprehensive understanding of the world of affordable housing. So we just thought we're really fortunate to kind of start off the year with the kind of broad overview that you can bring. If I can just give some of the numbers that indicate kind of the breadth and scope of what you've done. In your time, you've arranged $2 billion of financing. Helped create 96 affordable housing developments, and in total 10,645 units placed into operation. It's an incredible track record. And the interface we're trying to get here for this committee is kind of a broader understanding of what you see as the legislative and entitlement and funding challenges. And within that, we're hoping to discern what involvements for the AIA as an organization, where the AIA can apply its advocacy potential to, and then what also, as a further focus to what we want to achieve this year, what might you see as some of the holes that designers, in their capability and understanding to shape the physical environment within the constraints, can add to the debate. So this group is composed of a lot of people who are involved in housing and community development, and are looking to expand what we do further and more broadly, become more aware of the various programs that are out there, the issues, and we want to become more intimately involved. So before I hand to you, just want to, Sam, thank you for being the champion of creating this connection that's leading to this event tonight. So, and thank you for your kind of guidance and pushing us as we try to move the committee forward this year. So with that, please welcome Jeff Eric and Jessica.
Awesome, thank
Sure.
you. I'm gonna
welcome, guys. Thanks. Yeah, and Jessica's going to get the slide set up. We'll be so Praxis has been around since 2004. We are development finance consultants, as David said, and we are work with nonprofit, for-profit, or government agencies to assemble the financing for affordable housing. I'm a planner by training. I moved here from Massachusetts in 2002. It's a very small state, and I've worked with a number of your groups before. That Lucchese Galati, we did a project together in 2005 for the Housing Authority. We're working, as you know, with Sam on affordable housing, and a number of the speakers who are coming this year are people we work very closely with. Hillary Lopez worked for Praxis for 8 years, I think, before she left this year to go to the Housing Authority, to run the Reno Housing Authority. So I love that it's a small state. You can get things done. And the way we've organized it, Jessica Rasmussen, who's a senior project manager, has been with Praxis for 9 years. She's incredibly experienced at the nitty-gritty of closing transactions. And what we'll do is first she'll walk through the types of affordable housing projects that we work on and what the financing consists of, as well as talk about the recent funding through the American Rescue Plan Act and Clark County. that we've had an enormous windfall of money for affordable housing at the end of last year. And then I will talk at the end about really walking through some of the legislative victories we've had over the last couple sessions, and going into the 2023 session, things that we're working on, but also non-legislative things that I think the AIA could be incredibly helpful with. And so hopefully we can get through our presentation in about 15-20 minutes and leave lots of time for discussion. Thanks. Jessica, you're on.
All right. Just to echo what Eric said, thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. I think we're really excited about a possible collaboration with all of you. As he said, I'm Jessica Rasmussen. I'm a senior project manager. I've been at Praxis for 9 years. So I will just be giving an overview of two primary financing types that we use most in the state of Nevada. So the first is the 9% low-income housing tax credit. These are usually smaller transactions between 40 to 60 units, depending on where the project is located. They're going to have deeper income targeting. So usually these projects all of the units are below 50% of area median income, with a mix of 30% AMI and 40% AMI units. The fact that there's lower rents on these means that we can borrow less permanent debt on them. And so we're using more soft subordinate debt, such as home funds, National Housing Trust funds, Federal Home Loan Bank, Affordable Housing Program funds to fill the gap. And then because these are smaller transactions, they're typically coming at a higher cost per unit because we're losing economies of scale that you would get with a larger project. The 9% program has strict application and closing deadlines. So
Jessica, sorry.
Yeah.
Are we all having sound issues with Jessica, or is it just me?
I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good here too.
It sounds fine. So
Okay. I'm sorry then.
Sorry, Monica, it's you.
It's me.
Sorry. Yeah, so typically the 9% tax credit applications are due in May in the state of Nevada, and then you're trying to close by the following May, at the latest by the end of the following year. That means that these projects typically take a little bit longer to develop. And then finally, 9% tax credits are a competitive funding source. And so in order to win these funds, the projects are usually going to have more supportive services, more amenities, and more energy efficiency than the other type of financing. So this is an example of a 9% project that I've been working on, the Golden Rule Senior Apartments, which is in Las Vegas. It's a 60 unit new construction senior project. The average rent level is below 40% of area median income. And so like I described with the subordinate financing, we're using city and county home funds on this project. We're using National Housing Trust funds from the housing division, in addition to conventional construction and permanent loans. And then the developer is basically offsetting their land cost with a seller note, and they're deferring some of their developer fees. So there's a lot of financing that's going in to get this one done. This project closed in November of 2021, and it should be done hopefully by April of this year.
And Grand Canyon is the construction manager on this project, just so we.
The other type of financing mechanism that we're using is tax exempt bonds and 4% low income housing tax credits. So on these transactions, the bonds basically trigger the use of 4% low income housing tax credit. So that's a lower subsidy, but the funds come together. So these are larger transactions, usually about 200 units, and they're going to maximize the tax credit rents. So these are usually all of the units, or most of the units are at 60% of area median income, which means that they can leverage more permanent debt. Usually about half of the project is funded with the tax exempt debt. And then there will usually be some soft subordinate debt. So I think Eric will touch on this more later, but in the state of Nevada, home funds trigger a property tax exemption. And so all of our projects, bond or 9%, are going to have home funds on them in order to trigger that tax exemption. And then there's some other soft subordinate financing sources that we can use for these projects, specifically growing affordable housing program funds, which is a special program that the state created specifically to help these projects pencil. Because of the large size of these, they're going to have a lower cost per unit. And then in the past, they've typically had a much more flexible funding process. So the applications were submitted on a rolling basis. And so you would basically get your investor and lender on board, submit your application, and then you could close, as soon as your project could get permitted and all of that. That's changing a little bit, but we can talk about that more later. And then traditionally, these sources have also been non-competitive. That's also something that is changing a little bit right now. So we'll talk about that. This is an example of a 4% bond deal that I've been working on. This is Vintage at Washington Station. It's in Reno. It's a 205 unit new construction senior development, and the rents are set at 60% of area median income. The site was sold to the developer at below market value. The city of Reno owned it and wanted affordable housing built on this site. And then they also granted a sewer fee reduction, which was really helpful to the capital stack. Other financing for this, so we had a nominal amount of home funds from the Washoe County Home Consortium. And then we had the Growing Affordable Housing Program funds from the Housing Division, in addition to conventional construction and permanent debt. So this project closed in May of 2022 and will be done in about 2 years. So this is just a quick comparison of the two financing sources next to one another. So you can see that a 4% deal like Washington Station is going to have a lot more permanent debt. It's going to be funded about half by permanent debt and then almost another half by tax credit equity, with those other sources being, so small that they're negligible. Whereas a 9% project like the Golden Rule is going to be funded basically 75% with tax credit equity. And then you can see all those other soft subordinate financing sources coming in there to fill that additional 25%. So as Eric mentioned, and as I'm sure you're all aware, last year was a huge year for affordable housing in the state of Nevada. So there was $500 million awarded through the Home Means Nevada initiative. Those are American Rescue Plan Act funds. That's an amount of money that the state of Nevada has never seen for affordable housing. So it's a great opportunity. The projects that were awarded, it'll be 2,800 units of new construction and a little over 1,000 units preserved. There was also money given for down payment assistance and home repair or modification programs, and some for land acquisition related to affordable housing development in the future. And then the Clark County Community Housing Fund. So also last year, Clark County designated some of its general plan funds for affordable housing development. So they awarded $120 million. That will fund about 2,100 units of new construction and almost 1,000 units of preservation. And then they've said that they're going to be holding another round for permanent supportive housing. Those projects were excluded from receiving those funds in the first round. So we're waiting for that in 2023 or following. So obviously, this is an amazing opportunity for the state. There's also a lot of implications for the affordable housing industry. So right now, between these two programs, we're aware of about 50 projects that are in various stages of development. Some of the projects that received either of these funding sources were very close to closing and beginning construction. They just needed a couple $1 million to close a financing gap that had arisen out of inflation or whatever else may have come up over last year in the crazy construction environment. Other projects are much further out. They're in like early design phases. Some of them are needing rezones, things like that. So, but overall 50 projects in these stages of development. This is so many more projects than our state is typically developing over a couple-year period. The funds have to be allocated by the end of 2024. So, and that means because they've been awarded, but they really need to be loan agreements signed, projects are financially closed, ready to begin construction. So there's an urgency to getting these funds out the door so that we don't have to give them back. There are new regulatory requirements that are triggered by the Home Means Nevada initiative funds. So specifically, those funds were requiring state prevailing wage, which we have never used on affordable housing in this state. We have used Davis-Bacon federal wage rates on a lot of housing authority projects, but state prevailing wage is a whole new beast. And so every member of the development team, developers, architects, contractors are really trying to figure out how this will be incorporated. It's also significantly increasing the cost to build these units. Probably most importantly, as you all know, this is a small state. There's not a ton of developers. There's not a ton of architects that are doing this work, not a ton of general contractors. So the capacity of all parties involved in these is going to be stretched over the next couple of years. And so that's something that we're really trying to figure out how we can support our clients in filling gaps in their knowledge sets, and kind of coordinating so that these projects are not all moving forward at the exact same time and putting too much strain on all of our consultants and contractors. Another major thing is that a lot of the Home Means Nevada program applications put in that they would also be using 4% tax credit and bond funding. And the housing division is working to try to make sure that there's enough of that funding to cover all of the Home Means Nevada projects that need those funds. But this source that has traditionally been non-competitive is now essentially oversubscribed. And so there's going to be a lot of figuring out how different sources can work together, which projects still need bond funding, and projects that otherwise that don't have Home Means Nevada funds that we're planning on coming in under the bond and 4% programs are essentially on hold for the next at least 2 years while these funds are given to Home Means Nevada program projects. And then finally, because of the timeline to use these funds, reducing regulatory barriers at the local levels is going to be really critical, because we just really need to make sure that these are not being held up in, plan check and permit processes, that if things need a rezone, that there's not a lot of opposition to them, things like that. And Eric will talk about that a little bit more.
Great. Am I on? One thing I want to point out is the combination of the Home Means Nevada funds and the Clark County Community Housing Funds, which are in effect, those are laundered state ARPA federal funds that basically the Clark County used ARPA funds for something they would ordinarily use their own general fund monies for, and we're able to then set aside those monies in the general fund, which was wonderful for affordable housing. But $620 million is about 20 times more than we get annually in gap funding for affordable housing. So it's extraordinary for Nevada and raises all sorts of capacity issues, as we'll discuss. I would take a step back and say we've been riding a wave on affordable housing for the last 5 years or so, and I think that the $500 million for affordable housing didn't just happen, that there was a coalition that put together a plan for using ARPA funds, that Nevada received $2.7 billion. And there was a committee and a number of members of AAA. I think, Monica, you were on that committee, others, but where we advocated for money for affordable housing. And we made up a number, 500 million. It seemed crazy. And it'll be put into 4 pots, and lo and behold, the governor adopted that plan. So it was, watch out what you wish for. So going back to in 2018, there was an interim committee on affordable housing, study committee on affordable housing that was chaired by Senator Ratty. And a lot of the momentum, I think, started at that point where we had, probably 40 hours of testimony on affordable housing. And I think she was very clear. I don't want to learn about need again. We know there's an extraordinary need. We want to talk only about solutions. And through that 2018 interim committee, there were about 6 or 7 legislative priorities that came out of that. And nearly all of them passed in the 2019 session. 3 of them I want to point out that I think that are particularly relevant is SB 103, which allows local governments to use their enterprise funds to fund affordable housing. And so local governments had been saying, we're not sure if we're allowed to. And so this makes it very clear that yes, you can do that. You can waive sewer fees for one project and everyone else pays a little bit more, and that's allowed. And so both the city of Reno, Clark County, and now I think the city of Las Vegas all have ordinances on the books that allow for fee reductions for affordable housing. And that's, right out of the work that was done by the advocates in the 2019 legislative session. We also created a state affordable housing trust tax credit program. So not a lot of companies in Nevada pay taxes. So it sort of was hard to create a program, but it's the state allocated $40 million of state tax credits that are specifically for affordable housing projects. And that I think it offsets gaming and insurance were the big candidates for tax reductions as a result of this program. So the very first state tax credit project is closing out. So even though the legislation passed in 2019, we had COVID hit in 2020, and all of a sudden there was no, gaming was not looking for any ways to shield their profits. So we had to come back, and I'll say in 2021 session, it fixed part of that state tax credit. The others, we created a advisory committee on housing that meets on a regular basis to advise the housing division and the Department of Business and Industry on affordable housing issues. And they get one bill draft request a year, every biennium. So our bill draft request for last session, 2021, was SB 12, which requires developers of owners of affordable housing have to notify local governments, the housing division, and tenants if they intend to opt out of their affordable housing projects. And the reason that this was created is, first of all, preservation is so much cheaper than building new. So if you can hold on to what you have or bring new naturally occurring multifamily housing in the community into the tax credit program or into deed restricted affordable housing, that costs a lot less than building new. And so this was one way of focusing on preserving what we have by giving local governments in the housing division more time to intervene if someone's planning to opt out of their affordable housing project. And another one, in the 2021 legislative session, we were able to fix the state tax credit, and there was a part of it was expiring. It was sunsetting because we were supposed to spend it all in 2 years, and then COVID happened and there were no transactions. And so now it's been extended indefinitely, and we fixed some technical issues with it. When I say I'm talking about the Nevada Housing Coalition. I'm on the board of the coalition and the chair of the policy committee. I would strongly encourage AA members to join. We think it's a great organization. It's a great way of keeping up with what's happening with affordable housing. They put out important information. One of the successes this last year was we received a $500,000 grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco to build the capacity of nonprofit developers in Nevada, which is what Joanna is overseeing for the Housing Coalition. But they also have a legislative subcommittee. We meet once every month right now, but we'll meet bi-weekly during the legislative session. And you're welcome if you'd like to be a member of that, reach out to Christine Hess at Nevada Housing Coalition for more information. Going to the next slide. So right now, the 2023 session, it's taking shape. There's a lot going on with a new administration, new legislators. The one bill we know about that the Advisory Committee on Housing is putting forward a bill, AB 62, which will fix the property tax exemption on affordable housing. Right now, the only way to get an exemption is if it's deed restricted housing serving households below 60% of AMI, and it has home funds as part of the financing. The problem with that is that HUD home monies trigger all sorts of HUD federal cross-cutting regulations. And so it's HUD environmental review. It's working with the State Historic Preservation Office. There's specific MBE, WV requirements, and relocation, you trigger Uniform Relocation Act. And so there's lots of things with the home program. It's a great source of gap funding, but to have it on every single transaction is very cumbersome. And so this would make it any of a number of sources of funding for affordable housing, including tax credits, would automatically trigger the exemption. And so I think we have the support of Clark County and Washoe County. They are tired of getting applications for $50,000 for a $60 million project. So we can trigger our property tax exemption. And so it's sort of, we're thinking that one stands a good chance of moving forward. Other things we're working on that are just taking shape. We had during the 2021 session a source of income protection legislation, which would have basically, made it illegal for a landlord to deny someone specifically because of their source of income. And I use the example of the Section 8 program, where it would be illegal to post on Craigslist, no Section 8 allowed if you're posting an apartment. And that you could always turn someone down for other reasons, but not for source of income. And so that's one of the things we'll be looking at. There was the real estate transfer tax funds are affordable housing trust fund program in the state. And there's a big loophole that's allowed a lot of money to be lost on. And this was specifically being used by gaming on some very large transaction sales of casinos. And I don't think they even particularly care whether it's there or not. They just benefit from it because it's there. And we'd like to see that loophole. I mean, it'll bring in, $2 or $3 million more a year in additional funding for affordable housing. We're working on separate source of funding for permanent supportive housing for folks graduating out of the homeless system. So housing with services for chronically mentally ill, for youth aging out of foster care, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, there's not a lot of specific support for that type of housing, and it doesn't get built in the state. We have a really abysmal record of building permanent supportive housing in Nevada. Another one that we're looking at is in the land use code right now, in state statute, excuse me, and there is legislation that larger counties above, with populations above 100,000 have to prepare a housing element, first of all, but they also have to report on things they're doing to support affordable housing. But right now it's just an exercise where there's a menu of options and you check some boxes and it gets handed to the lowest level planner at the government, at Clark County and so on. There's no teeth in it. And one of the things we're looking at are the things we could do to strengthen that part of the statute to make it more meaningful. And so those are the things we're talking about. They haven't turned into bill draft requests yet. I also want to just point out that there's all sorts of things we could be working on that don't require state legislation. And I think that those in particular are things that AIA members could be very helpful in in supporting. And one is just anything that we can do to reduce barriers to the development of affordable housing. And I give the example, a number of jurisdictions have density bonuses, parking reductions that are specifically for affordable housing. And that sort of reduces some of that if you're building housing for homeless seniors, we shouldn't have to meet the same parking requirements as typical multifamily apartment buildings. But right now, you have to go through some sort of variance process or something to get those requirements waived. The city of Reno, I'm most familiar with, has some very good language on density bonuses and parking reductions. I know Title 30 for Clark County is being revised right now. We would love to see more goodies for affordable housing in the land use code in Title 30, and particularly just more land. I mean, I think we need more land zoned as of right for multifamily housing, period. That it's difficult to build affordable housing just assembling this complex financing that Jessica's describing, but to have the requirement that you have to go through multiple levels of public review before proceeding makes it even more difficult. And I've been to some incredibly nasty hearings in Clark County opposing projects that really there should be more as of right land for multifamily development. One of the things I just wrote down, the definition of supportive housing in Title 30 is not correct right now. It's one of the things that we had made some suggestions for broadening that definition. Anything to promote the development of ADUs. In Reno, I know there was some attempt to do that there was a lot of pushback, but I think those are generally, within the affordable housing community, this is one way of addressing housing need. And we, I'm of a mind that building more housing in general doesn't lead to affordability necessarily. Housing doesn't trickle down. Affordable housing doesn't trickle down. And so there's only so far you get by just building more, that you need subsidy and you need land use restrictions on, deed restrictions on the properties that make them affordable for extended periods. Anything to encourage local governments to make more land or public facilities available. We're seeing that more and more, and it's really only in the last few years that we're seeing local governments donate land for affordable housing projects, and that is, that's perhaps 5 to 10% of the financing for a project is land. So if we can get free land, that helps us part of the way there. One of the things we've been working on is fixing the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act has a special section for affordable housing. And so, but it's been very, very difficult to use. And just recently, as a result of work that Clark County was doing, we now have new guidance on Section 7B, which I think we're going to see a lot more local governments nominating land for affordable housing. And it's basically would be sold at a nominal price, $100, to a developer with deed restrictions on the property. And so we're very excited about that. We'd like to see that. Part of the problem is that this has been on the books. SNPLM has been on the books since the early 2000s. There's only been 4 projects so far that have closed using this program. We have a 5th that is going to close in March, but we're hoping to see much more development on BLM land under these provisions. And the last one Jessica referred to is that we are very limited in our bonding authority in the state. We get around 350 million a year of bonding authority. The way it's allocated is very odd. It's half of it is given to the local governments in small slices. So, and they then decide which projects they would like to fund. The other half goes to the Department of Business and Industry. The Nevada Housing Division, who's the actual issuer of the bonds, doesn't get any bonds directly. And so they have to beg each year to get bonding authority for projects. And every once in a while, there was the high-speed rail project that wanted $200 million at one time for of bonds for their project. Right now, there was something on the books for 180 million for a salmon farm in rural Nevada. This is affordable housing is a great use of bonds because we get the 4% tax credit comes automatically. We have this automatic leverage that comes with the bonds. And with the Home Maintenance Nevada, all this gap funding, we're not going to be able to get that out the door if we don't have the bonds to use with alongside them. And so we're really going to be pushing for using local governments and and Department of Business and it's really allocating their bonds for affordable housing projects, at least for the next couple of years. So that's a lot to cover. Yes, just open this to questions.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate that. Keeping my video off because apparently someone's got some sound issues. And my apologies for not muting sooner. Sorry that y'all probably heard some stuff. So questions, or I can start too.
Yeah, Monica, this is Deb. Oh,
Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, I had a question on the BLM land through Sniplama. Do you know how those locations are determined? And I'm asking that question just to kind of see if there's an opportunity to co-locate those BLM developments with transit.
There was a nomination process early on in the mid 2000s. And so a whole bunch of parcels were set aside at that time, both the housing division in Clark County, the Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority. I'm not sure what the process is now to nominate parcels. I know that that Henderson has a number of sites that they're going to be nominating. And so it sounds like it's just an open process, but I'm not sure. I mean, that would be a good future discussion of how that's done.
Okay,
Henderson seems to be furthest. I mean, I think Clark County's had sites set aside since the mid 2000s, but haven't been able to proceed. I don't know if those expire at some point or what.
Yeah, I guess I'm hopeful that they're infill sites instead of, the BLM land on the edge. So I'll check in with Henderson to kind of learn more.
And,
Thank you.
They would need to be infill sites. I mean, really, that I think that these projects can shoulder the cost of infrastructure to bring it out to a new place. So you're looking for islands beyond land in urban areas.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, because if it's way out, then you've also got to get on the bus every time and travel possibly 2 hours to get to a doctor's appointment or to work or right. So sometimes there aren't grocery stores that far out. So infill makes the most sense to me too. Real quick before somebody else jumps in. Eric, I think Eric, you were talking about this. Maybe it was Jessica. It was about capacity and not enough architects or builders to do all the work that could really be done right now. But we were going after a project a couple of years ago, and we did not have much experience in multifamily housing. Is that a big piece of criteria that's going to kill your client's project if you don't have that? Because those are points or something associated with
well,
that.
I think for the 9% program, you have to have site control, a purchase and sale agreement, an option, et cetera, and it has to be properly zoned. So you can't even apply for that. And I think the challenge has been that it takes 6 months to assemble the financing of a bond project. And if you don't have a patient seller, it's very hard to, that's part of that you have either deep pocket developers who are working at risk and they're buying land and they're just, we'll entitle it on our own time. But for, small nonprofits, so on, it's very hard for the timing to work these days.
Right, but does that have anything to do with how qualified your architect is for doing multifamily housing? Or the history of affordable housing? That's what I'm after.
I'm sorry, then maybe so, when we work with clients, I think the learning curve is not that steep if you're if you're designing multifamily housing already, it's not that steep to move into affordable housing. And usually that we're spending a lot of time with architects. I don't know, Ann Johnson. I don't know if you had done an affordable housing project before Wardell Street.
Yeah, we had.
Oh, okay. And I just think that there's some, accessibility requirement, very specific accessibility requirements, energy requirements. There are amenities that we promise that we need to make sure the architect remembers. Don't forget, we promised this amenity, and things like that. But I don't think it's that steep learning curve if you're already designing multifamily. Right. If you haven't done multifamily, I think that's a much steeper, that we are really, telling our clients that to find architects that have multifamily experience.
Cool, thank you.
And Eric, it seems like there's also been kind of an influx of looking for regional sources as well. So I think some people are turning to New Mexico, Colorado, Texas.
Oh, of architects, you mean?
Yes.
I think we're undersourced in a lot of areas. That's just the reality. I can tell you there are no lawyers. I mean, in the state of Nevada, all of our transaction lawyers come from elsewhere to do these transactions. So it's just, it's very, very, very specific work. So.
Eric, this is Sam. A quick question. We recently were, Bill McCurdy with Clark County Commissioner reached out to us and met with us and had a lot of questions regarding what can he do to help facilitate making affordable housing easier, getting through the red tape, a variety of things. Have you guys had a meeting with any of the commissioners with Clark County in that very topic, or is this something that you seem very interested in, and you are a wealth of knowledge that I would love to connect you guys up if that's something that you already haven't had a dialogue with them on.
I think I'm trying to, I mean, certainly there have been great champions of affordable housing on the Clark County Commission. And I think of Marilyn Kirkpatrick. Marilyn Kirkpatrick sort of chaired a legislative subcommittee on affordable housing in the mid-2000s. And so she's been at this a long time. And I've seen her take on residents in a way that I'm and they're not even in her commission area, but just on projects. I'm not surprised. So I think I think that's really, really helpful. And it just sounds like the fact that the county commissioners were able to allocate $120 million. And if you watch that meeting, unanimous support, everyone's patting each other on the back. That I think that the staff have been doing an extraordinary job, briefing the commissioners and getting them ready for this stuff. But I mean,
and you talked a little bit about some of the changes with Title 30 too. If that's something that any of these commissioners can help champion, that just makes it easier.
Well, I think in particular, if there were some special, it sounds like I don't know if they're looking at parking reductions and density bonuses in general for multifamily, or if it's specific to affordable housing. But we really do differentiate between the two, because I think that they're just building more multifamily housing doesn't solve the housing problems in the state. And so we're looking for benefits that sort of target those groups, between 0 and 50, 50 to 80, 80 to 120, and % of median income, which is HUD's definition of low is below 80% of median income, and moderate is below 120% of median income.
Okay.
I'd like to follow up on that question because I was interested. Like in the short term, I'm just looking at economics of it. In the short term, it is likely that no total increase to the housing stock would trickle into affordable housing, but given like kind of the magnitude of the shortage right now, 80,000 units short, in the long term, would not expanding the housing stock at any tier ultimately create?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
if you'd asked an economist, they would say yes. An economist, and I think that it's just that we for our work and Nevada Housing Coalition, we're keeping our eye on those those lower income areas that and there's a big argument. Our tax credit program ends at 60% of AMI. That's really low, and so being able to get up to 80% of AMI for rental housing would be extraordinary. And right now there's just this cliff after 60. One of the things, Congress just changed the rules on the tax credit program and allows you now to go up to 80, as long as for every unit you do at 80, you have to do a unit at 40. So the average is still below 60, which we think is great. So it's more income mixing and so on. And so we're hoping to see more of that in the future.
Eric, this is Deb. I dropped a question in the chat. Could you share just a little bit more about that 80,000 unit shortage? Is that kind of projecting out for future growth, or is that just kind of today's shortage?
And where did that come from? I actually, David, you're the one who raised that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was from a figure that ULI,
Okay.
regional economists have put together, but I've heard it from a number of other sources as well.
And there are tools that are used in other places that we just don't use in Nevada, like inclusionary zoning, which is used very, very commonly, in California and in other areas, and that could be. I think usually these things, during the boom, and we've had a boom in northern Nevada, very, very tight housing market, a lot of new multifamily built. And only the affordable piece is just a drop in the bucket. It's mostly units that are at $2,500 per unit per month housing. I think that's where, that those units are going to be, we're going to reach saturation there pretty quickly because our incomes have just not, we're still a relatively poor state. The median income in the state is, and our renters are primarily below 60% of AMI or up to 80% of AMI.
Hey, Monica, can I ask a question? Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Eric. Go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, I had a quick question on, have you had any experience or found that form-based code, adopting that in your municipality can help provide more affordable housing because of it seems like it gives a lot of freedom. I know the core city of Vegas is adopting that in some core areas, and I'm somewhat familiar with it in some work back in the Midwest. And it seems like a much friendlier approach zoning wise for affordable housing.
What is a form-based code?
Oh, you're not familiar with it? Oh, okay.
No,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. Yeah. It's basically based on new urbanism. Kind of the live, work, play idea. And basically, conceptually, it's just, small town America, Main Street, town square, buildings to the street, less parking requirements, promoting walkable communities, diversified incomes. It's just all kind of, all good news.
So,
frankly.
so things like zero lot line zoning. And
Exactly.
Things
Yes.
that would be,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes,
And
the density
no,
can get better, et cetera.
It gives the design team more flexibility to meet objectives and criteria instead of being so prescriptive.
I think,
Yes, very well. Thank you, Ann.
um,
Much better.
and I got my start in, I worked in public housing redevelopment, Hope 6 planning in the mid 90s, where we, we're all doing new urbanism, all tearing down old public housing and reintegrating the streets and doing. And I think, you know, we've been, in Reno, we have these mixed use zones that are, give you, basically there's virtually no density limit. And it's just, you know, as long as you basically, as long as you meet the parking requirements, which are significantly reduced, you can, and those, I think when we're able to build in zones that have, you know, a lot more flexibility in terms of density, parking, and so on, you know, it obviously will make it much easier to do those projects. I'm not sure it's reducing the cost of the projects too much. In other words, that once we're, you know, once we're building multifamily housing and to code, and we're providing, you know, the energy and accessibility and all those things, we're that we're sort of working around the edges and some of this stuff. I'm not sure that it's, you know, by in and of itself, it's going to create affordability.
I want to follow up a little bit on Bob's discussion, and I know we're short on time, but as you're talking about the form-based code, a lot of the places where that's been adopted locally and where it's starting, what's happening is there are a lot of small lots available. So it's a lot of small infill lots that maybe you can put one or two together, but it's not the kind of scale that you're talking about for the funding where it's 60 units, 200 units. It's the onesies, twosies. So I'm curious
Right.
to know
Well,
if there's part of your financing model that responds to smaller scale in multiple sites also, and how that might work as we're trying to encourage more
Yeah, I mean, I think
developers.
the you know, we responded to an RFP from the city of Las Vegas that wanted tiny homes, and very, very inefficient. I mean, just incredibly inefficient for affordable housing. And so, you know, what's efficient is a box. I mean, if you're doing, you know, senior housing is a double loaded corridor elevator permanent building with as few, you know, with a perimeter that has no jagged edges, you know, that's what saves money building housing. And we, I think the affordable product that we've been mostly doing is, you know, elevator apartment buildings for senior with double loaded corridors, surface parking, or 3-story walk-up family housing, surface parking, separate community, you know, community center pool area. And that's sort of the very common, you know, typology of these. Anything that's mixed use is impossible because the, you know, the commercial space, everything has to work independently from a financing perspective, that the commercial space has to carry itself, so on. So it's very, very hard to do, that we end up doing very vanilla things. Those are the easiest to finance.
Eric, you can't put retail on the main floor, make that a separate project and put, you know, housing on top of that as affordable.
You can, and it's just not, I mean, I think the planners have wanted to see things like that. The projects that have been built that way have been failed. I mean, I think there was a project L'Octane that was in Las Vegas, so that's on Las Vegas Boulevard, I think. That was an example of, you know, affordable housing with commercial frontage and so on. We had one on West 4th Street in Reno, very similar situation where it was an utter failure. And it was partly that was, the city really wanted to see that happen, because conceptually it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, well, I think I still think it is. I think the key is you got to get it in an area where there's a market for it. And I mean, the theory is you could do that as a market that could help pay for the affordable housing. It could help offset some of the housing because the commercial rents, particularly take the arts district where the commercial rents are high, and you put, you know, housing on top of that, and you get a mix of affordable and market rate. And what Ann was saying, and I agree with what she's saying, that there's a lot of 1-2 lot kind of things, but really you get into smart growth and form-based code, and you can it's relatively easy to assemble parcels, and that's really the goal, is to assemble, you know, enough parcels. And the city has, you know, they're doing some assembly themselves, and so they're going to have you know, larger lots available for larger projects, which work better with the formula that you've been talking about, you know, earlier in this presentation. You know, it's just, it's very complicated. I really appreciate your, trying to make sense of this. And I think we're gonna have to hire you if we're gonna do this, I believe. So.
Right. I think the issue, and I've heard ULI and the talks on this, but it's just the way our finance systems work. It really pushes you towards vanilla products because it's very, very hard to finance. So you basically, if you were to do that, you're doing a condo structure. The commercial space has to be basically, operated separately from the residential space.
Right.
They're financed separately. The people we work with, they don't like mixed use. They don't like mixed income too much. In other words, too much of market rate. It's too risky. And so you're sort of pushed towards more vanilla projects. And that's
Sounds
just
like
the
you gotta-
nature of,
Yeah. I think we need to lean on the
of,
ULI to help solve that then, don't we?
it's,
Because yeah. Okay, well, it's a challenge. Okay, well, thank you.
Oops, sorry. Maybe one more question and probably should let everybody go. So if anybody has anything, otherwise, maybe send some questions to us and we can share them with Eric and Jessica.
yeah, I did want to say, by the way, just want to say that both the Reno Housing Authority and the Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority received large grants through the Home Means Nevada program. And they're going to be putting out developer RFPs for those because no one has the capacity to get this done, in the time frame that is being required. So I did want to let folks, so that even though the monies have been allocated, I think there will be work opportunities that come out of this going forward. And so keep an eye out for those. We're also pushing very hard on the new administration to eliminate the state prevailing wage requirement under the Home Means Nevada program. It doesn't make sense. I think there was a strong push from the unions to make this a part of the program. We've never built a unit of housing with state prevailing wage. There is no residential rate for state prevailing wage. The trades that do that work don't do multifamily work. And so it's just going to be a disaster if we have to implement this. I just feel like we have one project in Northern Nevada that's about to close that is, went to the union halls, got the folks, they're coming in at $550,000 a unit to build affordable housing. And I think it'll take one project like that and the programs will go away. That it's just, that would be such bad publicity for these programs. So we just need to, it's expensive. Affordable housing is expensive to build. Adding, and particularly these small boutique 40 units at a time is expensive, but to add state prevailing wage on top of that is, will make it a non-workable program.
Eric, what do you think is reasonable per unit cost today in today's market? Per unit, yeah.
I think if we can, so our best developers in Southern, so Ovation Development, who does multifamily bond projects, Nevada Hand, Georgia Cakis, Vintage Housing in the North, they're all building for under 300,000 a unit, all in with land. Even with construction cost increases and interest rate, the rate, construction loan interest rates have gone up from, we were running numbers a year ago at 2.5% to 3%. And that was with cushion, and now we're at 7% for construction interest rates. And so just costs have gone up enormously, but they've still been able to stay in under 300,000. In California, they're, 800,000. I mean, they're just crazy numbers. We've been able to avoid that here.
Can I just ask, what is the average unit size that's usually built that also pertains?
It's generous. I mean, I think the state for a long time had a minimum of 650 for one and 850 for two for senior housing, and we've pointed out that that's way too generous. And they've loosened the requirements now that you can do a really nice 1-bedroom for $575 or $600 and $725 for a 2-bedroom or $750. And so I think that's, we'll start seeing more flexibility there. I think once you get below 500, 550, 525, say, it's really hard to build a fully accessible 1-bedroom unit with a decent bedroom size.
Sure.
That's but that a lot of the product that comes out ends up looking, in terms of floor plans, unit plans, so on, look very similar because we're all working within the same funding programs.
Yeah.
So you don't see big changes there.
Thank you for that. Well, we're already after 6. So, and I don't want to keep everybody. That was really good information. And like I said, send us some more questions and we can share them in the group via email and see if Eric can respond to that, or maybe we're going to have to drag you back into this and talk about it more.
And someone asked for a list of all the projects funded under the Home Means Nevada program. And I don't know, Joanna, the Nevada Housing Coalition put out an email. I was wondering if you might have that and could send it out to folks.
Yeah, I totally can. Yeah. Do you want me to send it to you, Tori and Monica, and you can send it to everybody? You got it.
You could, or you can reply all to the email.
Oh, sure. Yep, I can do that.
Oh, you know what?
And if you
go ahead.
And that's fine. I can do that. So I'll just send, I have that, and also the Clark County Community Housing Fund list, and I'll just email it to folks, but you can at least see what got funded. Okay. And it's probably a lot of your clients. So, it was a lot of product. What could go wrong? They allocated $500 million in the week before the governor's last week in office. And what could go wrong there?
So easy, right? Okay, so real quick, Joanna, thanks for posting that about the development workshops coming up in Vegas on the 2nd. So Eric, will we see you there, or Jessica maybe?
Eric will be on the Reno panel. Oh, yes. Yeah, he probably doesn't remember.
I guess I am.
Like 4 weeks ago.
According to Joanna, I am. So yes.
Yeah, so he'll be speaking on the Reno panel, but we have a different panel for the Southern Nevada. It'll be
so if you happen to be in Reno, sorry. If you happen to be in Reno, then you can see Eric again and ask him the rest of your questions. Otherwise, we'll field some of the questions here. Thank you both for coming in and talking to us. Appreciate the information. Who is iPhone? Sorry, Natalie, is that you maybe, or Rick?
No, it's not me.
Okay, good. All right. Just making sure we have everybody accounted for. So I really appreciate you two coming in and talking to us. This is probably going to spur some other questions when you disappear. So we may have to follow up with you on some things. If anyone's interested in becoming more involved with some of the policy stuff that they're doing over at Nevada Housing Coalition, you can reach out to Joanna, or if you don't have her email, you can get to her through us. I'm happy to connect. And let's see what else. Yep, thanks, thank you. I don't know if Eric and Jessica, if you can see the meeting chat, but thank you for presentation. And thank you all.
Thank you for your interest.
Oh, dude, super interested. So we're all just, trying to find our way in here and how we all get together. And, it can't be one group working in a silo. So we all need to be part of it. So thank you all for the questions, really good questions. And I guess we will call it a night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.